Well, once again, my name is Marc Jackson. We have the great Mike Sielski here. We appreciate you being here at the gallery at the Fitler Club for the speaker series. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk some hoops. You like that, Mike?
Sounds good to me, man.
That's good. Okay. So once again, we have Mike Sielski, author, not just an author, but a host of WIP. Mike has wrote many books, has did a lot of research. But I think we're here tonight to talk basketball. We're going to talk about magic in the air. He's also, with the Philadelphia Inquirer, he's a journalist. He is, let me tell you something. After reading this book, I thought I knew about basketball because I played it. And sometimes you get a false sense of reality. Oh, I know that. But then I was very humbled very quick. So I'm excited to learn more about this book. And I appreciate
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you saying that.
Yes, absolutely.
I wrote the book specifically for you to teach you all about basketball.
Thank you, because I had my thoughts on who was the first dunker, but then found out that wasn't true. So Mike, generally, can you tell us first, why did you write this book? What was your emphasis of writing this?
First things first, thank you all for being here. Thank you to Angelica and to Nick, and most especially to Mark for being here and making all this happen. This is really terrific. I've been in the Fitler Club once before, actually because I was researching my next book, which is about the making of the movie Rocky. And you can see up there is a very rare book in the club that deals with the movie, and I spent a morning paging through that, which was pretty cool. Anyway, to answer your question, Mark, the previous book I had done was called The Rise, which was a biography of Kobe Bryant. It was basically Batman Begins for the Black Mamba. I wanted to tell the story of Kobe's early life, his family history, life in Italy before he and the Bryant family moved here, and then of course his 4 years of Lower Merion, going to the NBA, taking Brandy to the prom, all that kind of stuff. And after that book came out, my agent's like, okay, what's your next idea? And I was hunting around, and a friend of mine named Tyler Kepner, who has covered Major League Baseball for years and years for both the New York Times and now The Athletic, and who is a Flowertown native, did a great book called K, A History of Baseball in 10 Pitches. And what Tyler did was, he basically wrote about the history of the sport, with each chapter focusing on a specific pitch that a pitcher throws. So chapter 1 was all about the fastball, and it went from like the great pitchers of the early 20th century all the way to the guys who throw 100 miles an hour today. And then the next chapter was the curveball and the slider, et cetera, et cetera. And it was almost like each chapter kind of stood on its own, as it's almost like a magazine piece in and of itself. But if you read them in succession, it was an unbroken narrative about the history of basketball. So I wanted to try, baseball, excuse me. So I wanted to try to do something similar for basketball. And the more I looked at the major figures in the sport, the major moments in the sport, whether you were talking about Michael Jordan, or Wilt Chamberlain, or Bill Russell, or the guy who's on the cover, Julius Erving, the more I realized that they were tied to players who were able to play above the rim. And it kind of dawned on me what the dunk meant to basketball. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized that the dunk was really kind of a vehicle for change, both within the sport and with American society. And the thing that really drove that home was the research I started to do into the fact that the slam dunk in this country from 1967 to 1976 was banned. And that's one of those facts, if you're a sports writer or even a sports fan, you kind of know it, and you just kind of sort of take it for granted. Like, oh yeah, the dunk was banned. Like, U.S. Cinder came along in the late 1960s, and he was really tall, and they didn't want him to dunk, so they banned the dunk. But the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about the context of the ban, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized, boy, there's a bigger story here. And it's not just about basketball, it's about the way America has changed, the way America has evolved, and the way that basketball has been, in many respects, an engine for that through our popular culture.
So you talk about the rules of basketball, how it's changed, and how rules of basketball are always changing. And why the dunk was pretty much outlawed because the tall guys couldn't dominate, of course. But you do that math and you learn so much. You learn more than you thought you knew. So you said you knew it was outlawed, but you didn't necessarily know why. During that process, what was the biggest thing you took away from that element? Was it just because Lou Alcindor, was it more than him? and things like that. Because I read your book and go back to some of the people who actually dunked. That wasn't necessarily tall.
Yeah.
That was one of the first people recorded. It said that it dunked the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it was about tall players. There was certainly a contingent of people who were overseeing amateur basketball in the country who were afraid about the way the sport was changing. There was actually an entity in the United States called the National Basketball Committee that actually oversaw high school and college basketball in America. But let's be very frank here and very honest. What the ban was about the fact that black players were bubbling up from the playgrounds and cities of America to the highest levels of basketball, and they were bringing with them a creative flair and individuality that was changing what the people who had their hands on the lever of power in the sport thought basketball ought to be. It's not a coincidence that the ban happens 1 year after Texas Western beats Kentucky in the national championship game in college basketball. Texas Western is the first team to win a national championship with 5 black starters. Kentucky doesn't have a black player on its team, isn't going to recruit a black player for another 3 years, and is coached by Adolph Rupp, who is both the most powerful person in college basketball. I shouldn't say both, I should say, who is the most powerful person in college basketball, who hates the dunk and has for a long time, and is also, not to put too fine a point on it, a raging racist. So those things happen, and Rupp starts to lobby other powerful people within the sport to take the dunk away. And then you have Alcindor come along in 1966. He's a sophomore at UCLA. It's his first full season of college basketball. UCLA goes unbeaten. Alcindor has what turns out to be the best season of his college career that year. And the people, as I said, who had their hands on the levers of power say, well, we got to stop this before the sport becomes something it was never intended to be, quote unquote. And so the ban goes into effect under the guise, and there was some sincere belief in this, but really under the guise that it was for safety reasons. They didn't want somebody to get hurt by a rim coming down or a backboard getting shattered. You know, that's going to cost money to colleges and universities. But there's really no way that you can look at that rule being put in place in 1967, given what's happened in the sport, given what's happening in the country at the time, and draw any other conclusion than it was racially motivated. And the cherry on top of all that, and then I'll get to your next question, I'm sorry for being so long-winded, is that I contacted the NCAA to try to get access to their archival material. They keep all the correspondence and letters and records of every NCAA president, and it's all at their headquarters in Indianapolis. So I emailed them and said, hey, I want to come out to Indianapolis and go through this material to see if there's anything pertaining to the ban. And they told me flatly, no. You can't
No, you couldn't get it?
No, I can't. No, you can't see it. So it's in the book. The entire email exchange I have with the representative from the NCAA is in the book, and I tell them flatly, look, if you don't want to let me, you don't have to let me see this, but you just don't want to let me see it. And if you don't let me see it, I'm going to print this entire email exchange in the book when it comes out, and anyone who reads the book will be able to draw their own conclusions. And I never heard back from them. So I think it kind of speaks for itself.
Absolutely it does. But now, not just that, there's so many different parts of the dunk and basketball that you're going to. What else did you learn from writing this book? What else did you learn in general overall?
So the book's very anecdotal. Each chapter is kind of its own entity, you know, similar to what I described in Tyler Kepner's, that if you read the entire chapter about Dr. J, you'll get a sense of what pro basketball was like in the mid-1970s, when it wasn't just the NBA, it was the ABA as well, and that's where Doc really made his mark. So the research I did for the early parts of the book was really revealing and really fascinating. I found out about figures in the sport who should be better known and aren't. So I'll mention two. The first one is a guy named Jumpin' Jackie Jackson, who was a semi-pro player in the mid-1960s. He had played at an HBCU in college, and actually led the nation in rebounding. But he wasn't tall enough and didn't shoot the ball well enough on the outside to play in the NBA. So he played in the Eastern League, in Trenton, which was a very good pro league at the time. And he was a legend at Rucker Park in the Harlem Rucker League. And back then, in the 60s and 70s, the Rucker League was a place where schoolyard legends could play against great college and pro players and kind of test themselves out, in this summer league. Julius Erving played there, Wilt Chamberlain played there, and Jackie made his bones by one day at 6'5", catching an alley-oop pass and dunking over Wilt Chamberlain. And it didn't matter that Wilt then dunked the ball the next 10 times he got it, and that his team won the game. What mattered was the individual skill and showmanship and the force with which Jumpin' Jackie threw the ball down on Wilt. And that was kind of the cool part about the Rucker League. It was that was how you made your bones.
That's still going strong, by
And it's still going strong, right. So, that league did an awful lot to elevate the qualities that we associate with the dunk. The flair, flying through the air, the 360s, the 540s, all of that aspect that, to be very frank, again, blacks and black culture brought to the sport, it allowed it to kind of germinate and flower.
Okay.
So that to me was important. I had never heard of Jumpin' Jackie Jackson until I was covering Villanova in the Big East tournament. And I was in Madison Square Garden. I was sitting in the eating area where the media are. It's kind of a dingy part of the garden. They have stale turkey sandwiches and tureens of terrible coffee kind of set up.
That's the norm. That's the norm.
That's the norm. It's all free, but it's terrible.
That's why it's the norm. It's free.
And I started talking to Bob Ryan from the Boston Globe,
Okay.
who's been writing about basketball for more than half a century. And I mentioned to him I was doing this book, and he grew up in Trenton. He went to Lawrenceville Prep. And he said, "You got to do a chapter about Jumpin' Jackie Jackson." And he spent the next 10 minutes, this 75-year-old man, pretending he was Jumpin' Jackie. And people are looking at us. And I'm like, "Bob, okay, I got it. I'll write about Jumpin' Jackie. I got it. So that convinced me to spend a lot of time on Jackie. The other figure who I fell in love with was a guy named Joe Fortenberry, who is really the person, the figure, who is connected most closely to the dunk gaining national acceptance as a term. I almost went down a rabbit hole with the book trying to figure out who was the first person to dunk, when did dunk become connected to basketball? And Joe Fortenberry is really the person who allowed that to happen. And he grew up in Happy, Texas, tiny little town in West Texas, and was on a semi-pro team in the mid-1930s. And he ended up on the US Olympic team. But on this semi-pro team, he played in an exhibition game at Madison Square Garden. And a writer for the New York Times happened to be there to cover this game. And he watched Joe and another teammate go through their pregame warm-ups. And as the writer, Arthur Daly, described it in the Times, Fortenberry and his teammate dropped the ball through the hoop as if they were dunking a roll into coffee. And because it was the New York Times, that was really the first time that the word dunk was connected to basketball. And as it turned out, Joe was the best player on the 1936 US Olympic team. Does anybody know where the 1936 Summer Olympics were held? Berlin, Germany. So this is the Olympics of Hitler and Leni Riefenstahl and Jesse Owens and the boys in the boat. It's also the first Olympics where basketball is contested. And the US wins the first Olympic gold medal in basketball. The final score of the championship game, I actually had a typo in the book, I hate bringing this up. The final score of the game was 19-8. It was played outdoors amid a rainstorm. They were literally dribbling the ball into muddy tennis courts. And Joe Fortenberry had a game-high 8 points. He was the best player on the first US Olympic team ever. So I went down to Amarillo, Texas to talk to his son, who's still alive. I got to hold his gold medal. And we drove out to where the Fortenberry family farm had been in the early 19-teens, and where Joe learned how to play. There was a hoop attached to one of the walls of the barn. And so his son Oliver and I are in this rented RAV4, and we're off-roading into the middle of this vast stretch of farmland that's just brown grass as far as the eye can see. And he says, "Stop!" And we're in the middle of nowhere. And he's like, "All right, this is where Daddy's farm was. You want to get out and take a look?" I'm like, "Okay." And I'm about to step out of the car, and he says, "Just one thing. Watch out for rattlesnakes, truly. And I don't know if he was saying that just because like he's gonna get a naive Yankee like nervous about rattlesnakes, or whether there actually were rattlesnakes out there, but that was the shortest reporting trip of the entire time I spent researching the book.
Oh my God.
All right, I've seen it. Let's get back in the car.
So we hear about many people dunk, not many, but some, and you go in the book and I hear so many different names of people dunking the ball. Who officially or unofficially was the first person to dunk a basketball?
Okay. So I almost drove myself crazy with this because there's really no way to know, right? There's no possible way we can know who the first person to dunk in a game was. And one of the earliest players to dunk in a game, actually, and I start the book this way, is, ironically enough, Jackie Robinson, who played semi-pro ball in the Los Angeles area in the 1940s before he joined the Dodgers, and was actually renowned for being a terrific basketball player and was known to be someone who brought dunking the ball to a wider audience in basketball. But the closest I could come was a guy named Jack Inglis, who played professional ball in northeastern Pennsylvania, and there were a slew of semi-pro leagues in New York and New Jersey and like Scranton and Pittston and all those players, little towns up there. And back then, basketball players were known as cagers because when basketball first started to spread around the country, the first outdoor and indoor courts actually would have fencing wrapped around them so that people in the stands couldn't get to the court to interfere with the game. I don't know how many of you happened to see the Oklahoma City Thunder Minnesota Timberwolves playoff game the other night, but in the final seconds of the game, right, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander throws the ball out of bounds to try to kill the last 5 seconds off the clock, and a fan stands up and catches the ball. Well, that never would have been allowed back in the day. So all these courts, as they sprung up around the country, would have fencing wrapped around them, 12-foot high fences. And in some cases, it was legal for two players to grab the fence or the netting around the court and like wrap it around a player who they were trying to defend. Like they were trolling for fish or something, you know? So Jack Inglis was the first player, apparently, who got the idea to climb up the fencing and stay there above the rim and have a teammate throw him the ball so he could slam it through the rim. Like he was Spider-Man, basically. And I found an author who had cited this in one of his books, and the guy's 80, 85 years old now. And I emailed him and asked him, where did you get this piece of information? And he kind of sort of remembered where he got it from, but he wasn't 100% sure. So even the story of Jack Inglis may or may not be true. But that kind of makes it fun, I think.
Absolutely. So we talk about the dunk and how it was originated and how it became so fearful it was going to change the game that they had to create a ban for a few years. You fast forward to now and how the dunk is looking at, and the evolution of a guy some of you might have heard of named Steph Curry. We talk about that. How do you see? Yeah, exactly. How do you see the dunk with how it's looked at now compared to how the three-point is looked at?
For the most part, the dunk now is a matter of function and not form. Look, I love Steph Curry as much as anybody. Brilliant, brilliant player. One of the most influential and revolutionary players in the sport for what he did in getting generations of kids to start chucking the ball from 25 feet out because he can shoot so well. But the three-pointer, you're an expert in this, I'm not telling you anything you haven't known for a while, has taken over the sport. It's no coincidence last year that the Boston Celtics, in winning the championship and running away with it, took and made more three-pointers than any team in NBA history. That's what the sport is about now, because it's all about math. The three-pointer is worth 50% more than a regular two-point shot. And what we've lost in that, I think, is the artistry, the spontaneity, the free-flowing, improvisational nature of the sport that drew so many people to it when the NBA really made its rise as a cultural and athletic force in this country. It's because of guys like Julius Erving and Michael Jordan and Dominique Wilkins doing things that we didn't think were possible. And that's the other dynamic too, is that we've seen so many of these athletes do so many things that are breathtaking that it's hard for people to be impressed by a slam dunk There's a reason that the NBA keeps bringing back 6'2" white Mac McClung to compete in the dunk contest every year, even though he's not an NBA player. I don't know how many of you know this. He's won the last 3 dunk contests, and he doesn't play in the NBA until a week before the dunk contest. And then he signs a contract, a very brief contract with an NBA team. The first time he did it was with the Sixers. He goes and competes in the dunk contest, wins, and then goes back to the G League. And the reason the NBA is doing that in part is because, as I said, Mac McClung is 6'2" and white. He upends every expectation that has been baked into our minds about who should be able to dunk. You look at him and you say, how the hell does this guy do it? And it brings that sense of wonder back to dunking that Michael Jordan and Dominique and Julius and David Thompson filled us with, and that we kind of have lost, I think.
You know, speaking of that, and as a former player, when I always thought about dunks when I was growing up, like, for me, the first person I seen dunking the person was my uncle. My uncle used to play basketball in local schoolyards, Timberland boots, he was untied. He was always a tremendous athlete, and he used to dunk it hard. And I always had that in my mind, and he dunked the ball hard. It's an intimidation factor. People move out your way, it's not much of a challenge. So when I grew up and I started playing the basketball, I never was blessed to have ups like Julius Erving and a lot of these guys have, but I knew if I dunked it, I had to dunk it hard. And I look at it now as a former player, look at the way the game has changed. And the game, how can I say this, has become more accessible for people to play it, not just watch it because of Steph Curry. They said, well, if that guy's about the same height as me, he's not ferocity, he's not 6'10" and dunking the ball hard. I can dunk, but I can practice shoot. So it made the game more, a lot of people feel as though it made the game more accessible that weren't giants like me.
That's a brilliant point, and you just put your finger on why Caitlin Clark and women's basketball are rising in popularity to the extent that they have. If you watch Caitlin Clark on TV, pulling up from the logo, throwing, tremendous passes across the court, no look, she looks like Steph Curry. And to the average viewer, the difference, basically Curry and Caitlin Clark have narrowed the gap in perception between men's and women's basketball. They look more similar now than they ever have before because of the very thing you're talking about, the way it's changed. I'd be curious to ask you, one of the interesting things I found in writing about the dunk compared within the sport now is one of the most exciting plays in basketball to me is when a player tries to dunk and a defender tries to meet him at the rim.
Yes.
And from what I understand and observe, that doesn't happen as much anymore. And part of the reason for it is, and some players have talked about this, is that players are so afraid now of becoming memes on social media for getting dunked on that they would sooner get out of the player's way than try to block the shot because they don't want to get embarrassed.
And respectfully, I am also a mentor to many young men and a mentor to some current NBA players. And I'm always on them. I said, if you didn't get dunked on, you didn't try. They're like, no, sir, you're not going to see me on the meme. And that's what they say. And now as we start in younger ages, because of now social media, which is taking over the world, people are scared to become the Michael Jordan meme with the crying face. People are scared, people laugh now. You watch some events that's not professional basketball where people get dunked on, and when they get dunked on, people run on the court doing like this, like laughing and pointing. So now guys want to play defense. But I always tell them, like, I have 3 sons that play the game, and I mentor a lot of other people that play the game. I'm saying that's part of the game. I'm like, yeah, but it's embarrassing. I'm like, yeah, but that's embarrassing. But it's part of the game. You know how many people cannot be in a position you are to do it? They wish they can do it, and to be embarrassed. So most of the people that's making fun of you are not in a position to be where you're at. So enjoy that moment. But I agree with you. A lot of them don't do it. It doesn't happen as much for several reasons. A, because the emphasis on shooting more 3-point shots in the game is pushed so hard. I'm gonna go a little deeper here. When you look at the percentages of coaches that's now being hired in the NBA front offices, majority are not former players. A lot of them are MIT grads. A lot of them are mathematicians on analytics on the 3-point shot compared to dunking the ball and taking. They say, well, don't shoot the mid-range, don't shoot the layup, shoot the threes, it's worth more. And if you make 25% of those, which the league averages around 36, if you make 25% of it, it's better than you making a layup. So like now players my size, and I'm 6'10", even though I shrunk a few inches last year, but I'm about 6'10". Now guys 6'10" and 7 foot that used to dominate the paint or used to try to dunk or net, now they're shooting threes. Like you look at the current 76ers future former MVP player, Joel Embiid. He's 7'1", 300 pounds, and he probably shoots more threes than most guards in the league, and that's where the game is trending.
Yeah, and your point about the social media aspect of things, that's really the flip side of what was happening within the sport when the dunk started to rise to prominence. I mentioned that game between Texas Western and Kentucky in 1966. Before that game, Don Haskins, the coach at Texas Western, went up to his biggest, strongest post player, David Latin, and told him, David, the first time you touch the ball near the basket, I want you to do everything you can to dunk it in the face of whatever Kentucky player is guarding you. And that's exactly what happened. Kentucky hit a free throw, and Latin scored the first basket of the game by catching the ball in the post, pass down from the point guard, and dunking over a Kentucky player. The Kentucky player was actually Pat Riley, who went on to coach the Lakers and the Knicks and the Heat, and Miami Heat president. But the reason Haskins told him to do that was because he was banking that Latin throwing down that dunk would intimidate all the Kentucky players. And so, I mean, you could write a PhD thesis about the dynamics at play back then and throughout the history of basketball with respect to masculinity and race. And, Don Haskins was happy for the name of winning a national championship to play on the stereotype of black players being bigger, tougher, stronger, more intimidating. And now we're at the stage, as Mark said, where that doesn't happen as frequently. It's a different dynamic with more international players in the game moving to the outside. I mean, he and I are pretty much the same age, and I can remember I was at LaSalle while you were at Temple, and you just killing my explorers by, there's Jackson stepping out from 17, 18 feet to hit a jump shot. That's not a good shot now in modern basketball.
Exactly.
Because why take a shot from 18 feet that's worth 2 points when you can take a shot from 23 feet that's worth 3? So,
and I got something for that. When I was very fortunate to play for my hometown, Philadelphia 76ers, our head coach was Coach Jim O'Brien. Jim O'Brien is a Philadelphia native, went to Roman Catholic High School, and I was fortunate enough to have him coach. And yes, I was a big, strong guy that scored a lot around the paint, and I could always shoot the ball. Because when I was raised and I was trained the game of basketball, I was trained to not only be strong, but be able to play guard-like type game. So I was a little bit ahead of my time. So I used to shoot a lot of jump shots at the top of the key around pick and pops, and then Jim O'Brien was the first coach that said, Mark, I need you to step back and shoot the 3. He said, I need you to step back and shoot the 3. And for me, having that mindset of being raised by old school coaches, I want you to shoot that jump shot, Mark, but don't shoot too many of them. So now I'm in the NBA and I'm playing for Jim O'Brien, and 7 seasons like, I need you to shoot the 3, which is just one step back further from where I normally shoot the jump shot. And I was so uncomfortable, and my mindset was so ironclad on the old school coaches that raised me, Mark, you better not ever shoot a 3, that I refused to do it. And then go down the line, as now I see what the game is. If I did that, it would have been like the game it is now. It's like, if you can't shoot the jump shot, they don't even look at you. I don't care how big you are. So I agree with that.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. So last year, the best basketball game I covered last year in 2024 was the Catholic League Championship game at the Palestra between Ryan and Roman. Roman won at a buzzer beater. Ryan hit a shot with 5 seconds to go, and a kid from Roman comes down the court and hits a pull-up 19-footer to win the game at the buzzer. And Mark's 2 sons had terrific games that night, and I ended up writing about them and about Mark. And just to share this, because you all laugh, this is what fatherhood is all about. Mark told me that night that he wears a mouth guard to all his sons' games because he grinds his teeth so much from the stress of watching them that he needed to wear a mouth guard. And when you're a writer and you get a detail like that, man, that goes high in the column, trust me. But I would ask you, like, what have you told your sons about how to play in the modern game? Like, I'm sure I've seen them, they have certain strengths in certain areas of their game where they want to work on, and they're high-level players. What have you told them about how to play the game and what do you think the game might be for them?
So that's interesting. So I have changed with the time. My first son, which is my oldest son, which is now a senior, when he was first starting to play the game, he was always a big, strong kid, even from like 6 months old. When I was with the New Orleans Hornets, when Chris Paul was my teammate, Shane, I remember Sharif sitting on my wife's lap, and he had, you know how you had water bottles here, and the signing ones where they get bigger down the bottom. He was holding the water bottle by the bottom and was just like swinging it. And Chris Paul said, "Oh, that's Bam Bam," and his nickname was Bam Bam. So he was always physically gifted, and so I always looked at him as a big, strong post player. He's about 6'8", 240 pounds. But I raised him to be a low post bruiser, similar to how I was. But then as he started getting older, I was like, okay, let's learn to shoot a little bit. But he progressed through that later in his career. I always told him, do not rush it. A lot of these people want instant gratification. Like, no, be processed with it. And as he got to
you just admitted to telling your kid to trust the process?
No. To a certain extent. But if you look at it like that game versus Ryan, he played against another kid, but Thomas Schobert, who's gonna be a first-round NBA draft pick. That's about my son, about a little bit taller than my son, bigger, stronger. But my son, who's not known to be a three-point shooter but can shoot the three, he started the game off with 2 straight threes. Yeah. So like I said, go through the process of that. So, but then with my middle son, Sammy, he's always been a late bloomer. He was always a really small, fragile kid, opposite of his big brother. He's about 16 months age different. But ever since, I don't forget, since he was 5 years old, he had his little basketball, 4 years old, his little basketball, and we was living in Tampa, Florida, and he said, Dad, look. And he put these cones around, and he started dribbling the ball between the cones. I said, oh, you're gonna be a point guard. And that's gonna work. And I started working with that. So then I worked with my oldest son, or being a low post scorer, and my other son being a point guard. And then as they age up, then I said, well, Sharif, now we're gonna start incorporating something into the game. But he's been working on a low post game his whole life. So now, one son who's 6'8", who's a post guy, and another son is 6'8", who's a point guard. And then my third son, Shane, comes around, who's gonna be tall and off. Both of them, he's a perfect combination of both. So I've evolved over time. I've really evolved over time. So now I tell Sharif, we gotta get 500 three-point shots up as well as a low post. And then say, like, all right, let's make some post shots today, because you're 6'8", some of these little guards may guard you. Then I'm like, my 14-year-old son, Shane, who's about 6'5", 250. So he's a perfect combination of both. But I've evolved over time, and all the players I mentor now, I said, you have to have something you're good at. No matter what position they claim you are, you have to have something to hang your head on and say, this is what I'm good at. So it's like, and now I mentor, like Jeannie here, her son is my nephew, is Judy, he's about 6'4". Okay, you gotta do this. Like, I teach many different things, I mentor many things because I see the game. I'm not one of these older former players say that the old guy, get off my lawn. Like, when you look at a lot of the older guys now, they say, oh, this is horrible basketball. Like, is it really horrible, is it just different?
Yeah.
And when I say that in certain rooms of former players, like if y'all was all former NBA players who's older than me, I'll be throwing stuff at me. Don't say that the game is horrible now. You know, as a Philadelphia native, I do not like the Boston Celtics because I am a Philadelphia native. So when they won a championship last year,
that was bad basketball to win a championship.
Exactly. So when they won, I'm that guy. When I watch the game now, it's 2 games being played. It's the game that won lost, and it's a game for me. So I wanted Boston to lose because they shoot too many darn threes.
Yeah.
Right? So me being a former big guy, and I think it's bad for the game, is bad. But then also watching the playoff now with Minnesota, with
and Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City, they all have big guys. That's very important. And I think Golden State kind of changed the evolution of the bigs. And now bigs are now disrespected, and they feel as though we don't need the bigs. So now the game is starting to turn back like, oh, we do need them.
Yeah.
So for me, I've learned to change with the time.
Two things. Number one, watching Marc during that game, that Philip, you would
I'm sorry, okay, cut you off. One more thing you forget, I always wear headphones in my ear. Because I can't listen to what people say on the sideline, because I get from 0 to 100 real quick. So to make sure I stay sane, I wear headphones so I can hear it.
So that ties into what I was going to say, which was he sat there next to your mom.
Yes.
And it was totally placid. Like he would never have known his kids were in this game. And it was only afterward that he told me about the headphones and the grinding of the teeth and all that stuff. But during the game, chill, totally. Until the end, when Roman hit the shot and then he lost his mind. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I have 2 sons, one of whom is about to turn 14, the other of whom is about to turn 11. And hearing you describe your 3 boys, I think each one of them could pick up one of my sons and crush him into a fine powder.
But they're all very good gentlemen.
Yeah, they are. They're really great to speak with.
But yeah, so like with that, like so when I look at the game, when I look at the game. We talked about Boston. We talked about the way the game is played now. We look at Oklahoma City, who's playing tremendous ball. They have the MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a scorer, who remind me a little bit of Kobe Bryant. They surrounded with a bunch of shooters, but then they have a big guy in the middle, Hartenstein. But they have another big guy, Chet Holmberg, who's 7 foot. But he's a great mixture of a big guy and a guard. He can dribble, pass, shoot. He can shoot threes. He can block shots. And I think that's the evolution of the new big, to be able to do everything.
Well, they're going to need it. Like, you know, we mentioned the Celtics, and I get into this in the book about the decline in the artistry of the sport. And it has become a lot about numbers. And what suffered is the mid-range. Like, if you were to look at a chart of the top 25 spots on a basketball court in the NBA where players shoot from, they're all around the rim, and they're all around the three-point arc.
Yep.
And personally, just speaking for myself, what I miss, and what I don't, and I like Shai because I think he's bringing a little bit of this back. I miss Allen Iverson crossing over a player on the perimeter and driving and dropping in a feathery finger roll over a player of Marc's size. I miss Kobe with the footwork and hitting a spinning 18-footer fall away that nobody else on the planet can hit. I miss the artistic, difficult shot that only counts for 2 points.
Yep.
But you watch a player do it and you say, how in the name of God did he do that? That's what's kind of getting siphoned away from the game. And I'm kind of silently rooting for Oklahoma City because I'm hoping that Shai kind of brings a little, because he does have a mid-range game. And if he's able to bring that back, then the sport will be better for it.
Exactly, and we mentioned Oklahoma City because now they're favorites now if you look at all the teams left. But let's transition to the Philadelphia 76ers. And
Do we have to?
I think we should. And when you look at the way their team is made up with the draft coming up, now we have the number 3 pick in the draft. You know, I look the way their nucleus is made up with Joel, Hans, and Embiid, Paul George, Maxey, and we got to mention McCain. He's like a crowd favorite. We look at their team and we look at how they're made. Like we talk about the dunk, we talk about the three-pointer. I remember Joel Embiid claiming and saying he's not a center. He said he's a mixture of Kobe Bryant and James Harden. He says he's a shooting guard, which baffles me still to this day. And he plays like a little bit. But we look at Paul George, who I know people, let me just say this, I know people say, oh, Paul George played like that. Yeah, he was injured. But first of all, I live in Center City. I love these random conversations. I walk down the street, and people are like, Mark, I need to talk to you for a minute. What's your thoughts? And I used to go back and forth. So now I just ask them, tell me your thoughts. Because you can learn a lot. But people say, well, we should have got Paul George. And I said, well, let me correct you on that in my opinion. If you look at people who were free agents, the time that Paul George was free agent, we had KD, who was not a free agent we had to trade for, LeBron James, who was a free agent to trade for, Jimmy Butler was not a free agent to trade for, and a guy in New Orleans called Brandon Ingram, who was not a free agent we had to trade for. Paul George is the only one we could have signed free and clear, and we did that. You know, and then you look at the way Maxey, listen, Maxey can do no wrong to me. His smile just brings like ball-is life attitude. He brings a joy of I just want to play basketball. It's fun. It's not a business yet. And that's what I love because this game is turned more so and guys not playing for the love of it. It's more so the business aspect, which it is a business.
Sure.
That's trickling down in college, but it is a business that you have to ultimately deal with. But when you play with that joy like you play in the schoolyard, it's different. What do you think about current team and the makeup of our team and now coming in third pick in the draft?
My complaint about the Sixers for a long time has been that they don't know what they want to be. Tell me what their identity is. That Golden State team that was a dynasty with Steph and Clay Thompson and eventually Durant, they knew what they wanted to be. Pat Riley, whether he was with the Lakers or the Knicks or the Heat, those organizations know what they want to be because of Pat and his kind of vision. The Celtics, even though we hate them, know what they want to be. The Sixers, to me, don't know and never really have. And I look at them now and I say to myself, okay, you've got the third pick in the draft. You and I don't think we've talked about this yet. I would, there's the debate kind of raging around this now is, if you're the Sixers, do you take a player with that third overall pick or do you trade the pick in the hopes that you can get a bunch of players, draft picks, etc.? I feel like they have to draft a player because I don't know what kind of trade they would make that would make it would almost be like, what trade, like you don't know what you have, you don't know what you are. So how can you possibly make a trade to add to what you have when you don't know what you have? That's kind of convoluted, but I think they kind of have to take the player and hope for the best. And I also think they have to act and carry themselves and make decisions as if neither Joel Embiid nor Paul George ever suits up for them again. They can't count on those guys. I'm not ripping either of them necessarily. I'm just saying the reality is what the reality is. Joel's past his prime. We have seen the best of Joel Embiid. If you get 40 games of him at 18-9, that's probably what you ought to expect, given the condition of his knees. Paul George is not a guy who's going to be the centerpiece of an offense. So even if you have them, they're not going to be what you thought they were going to be. So make your decisions accordingly.
That's a good point. So if you look at the 76ers with the way the salary cap is now, it's not a hard cap, it's a soft cap, but now with the new collective bargaining agreement, it's harder than ever. Which means if you go over the first apron or second apron, you're in a world of trouble, which, believe it or not, is going to make a lot of teams, no matter how much money they have on payroll, going to make them cut payroll. You're going to see a lot more superstars spread out amongst small market teams because of the new collective bargaining agreement. It's going to be very difficult for that. But when you look at the pick, the Sixers, Daryl Morey said it. He said last year he went into it, as long as we get to the playoffs, we have a chance. And then he came this year and he said, we need to prioritize regular season, which means we need to get younger. We need to get healthier. And respectfully, this team has been filled with some veterans with the old mindset, as long as you get the playoffs. Now it's like, you know what? We need some young energy that can play some games and just keep us good enough to get in the playoffs, and then anything's possible. You know, I'm a big advocate of Joel Embiid, but I will say this, after this past season, you know, I used to call him the biggest, baddest man in the league. Because when he plays, he's just unguardable. I don't care who's on the court. But after last year and then coming back from the Olympics, I don't know if I can rely on him being the old Joel. So I mean, what do we surround him with? Do we have to take that pick? I've been hearing and reading a lot of things about them taking that pick and packaging with a few other players to trade for other players to move back. But that's the only way we can sign more players. We can't sign no more veterans. We don't have enough money. Our money's tied up because of player options. Andre Drummond has a player option. Gordon has a player option. Oubre has a player option. And I think Oubre has made it clear he's opting in, which means we have less salary cap. And then our major free agents was Oubre, Kelly Grimes, and Yabusele.
Yeah.
And when you look at the April, like I said, we can't afford all three of those guys. So if Oubre opts in, we might have enough money for Grimes or Yabusele, but in my opinion, I don't think we have enough money for or that luxury tax is going to be crazy.
Yeah, and the other dynamic too is that in a way, it's a rough year to have the number 3 pick because, and again, Mark and I talked about this last week when we were kind of going over the show. The two players who are, everybody knows that Cooper Flagg, from Duke, is going to go number 1 overall to the San Antonio Spurs. And then the presumptive second and third picks are both from Rutgers, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. And both of those guys are 19 years old. Yep. And the ultimate upshot and the benefit to the NBA of the new landscape of college athletics with name, image, and likeness and pay for play is going to be that players are going to stay in college longer. They already are starting to stay in college longer. So there's going to be an opportunity for NBA teams to draft players who are 22, 23 years old, where for the previous 20 years, basically, they were all taking teenagers or 20, 21-year-old players from
drafting
overseas.
on potential. Right,
drafting on potential. Now the Sixers have a decision to make here. Like, are they going to take a 19-year-old kid? You know, the conversation Mark and I had was, you know, I would be skeptical about taking either player, either Harper or Ace Bailey, because they were both on Rutgers last year. Rutgers went 15 and 17. How good can these kids be if they're 2 of the 3 best players in college basketball, and Rutgers couldn't have a winning season with them? You know, I'm getting shakes thinking about Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz again. And Mark made a very good point. Rutgers is playing against teams that are older than they are. That more and more players at the college level are staying in because they're making so much money to play for Michigan and Ohio State and name your team in the SEC and Villanova. So
They want those players now that have played somewhere. I think BYU, Brigham Young University last year was the oldest team in college basketball history. Their age was, I think, second oldest in the NBA. So we talk about a college team was older than a couple of NBA teams. And they banked their buck that year on, we wanted to get guys that respectfully were hurt early in their careers and then petition for the NBA to give them that eligibility back. So their average age was close to 24 years old. And you think about, like I'm dealing with that now. My oldest son will be going to Lafayette next year. That was my middle son who's 17, who will be visiting the schools in about 2 weeks. Like he's young. He'll be a true 18-year-old. I never held him back. And like now, as he mentioned, like these schools pay now, and they pay very handsomely. So like it's going to keep guys in school longer for more development. But there's a lot of other things that goes into that, where there's no rules for us transfer. Where kids go, it'd be pretty much the NBA, the business of the NBA and being a professional basketball player has trickled down to college. Where now guys can go to college, and some kids are not visiting universities and institutions for the university institutions. They're just asking the coach, how much are you paying me? I don't need to come visit. How much are you paying me so I can compare with the other schools, and I'm going to go to the highest bidder? It's not really a connection to the university, it's more so about business and money now. That's what the game is. My son's not doing that,
Right.
but that's what it is now.
yeah, but your son is also going to Lafayette, which is a terrific academic school. And he'll get a great education. That's clearly part of the calculus for you.
But my second son is in a different category.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's the reality now. Like you're looking at two Big Five alumni, from schools with different profiles, certainly Temple and LaSalle. But I think a school like my alma mater is just going to become a farm team for Villanova or other schools like that. So we can explore all of that in any kind of questions.
But yeah, we get a question before. I'm going to make sure I top on the last part. What do you mean by farm team for other schools is LaSalle budget to pay student athletes, or that's all basketball players, may not be as much as Villanova
Right.
or St. John's could pay. So kids who are young might go to LaSalle for 1 year, 2 years, get older, play well, and then leave there to sign 7-figure deals at larger institutions. So that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, that's exactly what I meant.
So well, let's transition into any questions. We touched on a lot of subjects. Any questions?
Thank you very much for coming. Incredibly informative and interesting. The question I have is the current owner of the Sixers, Mr. Harris.
Don't sugarcoat it, everyone. Tell us how you really feel.
Which actually, with the reaction is kind of what I was thinking. With him being the owner and how he has managed the team, can you see the Sixers being successful as long as he is the owner? Because it seems as though as long as he has been involved, they've not really been able to achieve what they want to achieve. So,
All
can you
right,
talk
so
about that?
I'm of two minds of this. Some of the problem of Josh Harris's ownership is the change in expectations that are attached to the Sixers now. My theory about the Sixers, if you go back 20, 25 years, is that a certain segment of the population was comfortable with them winning 38 to 44 games every year, maybe being the 7th or 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, maybe winning a first-round series, but in all likelihood losing in 6 games to the Magic or the Pistons or a team like that. And you didn't have to invest very much in them. The expectations were so low that anything they did, for instance, the year in 2012 when they got to the second round and almost upset the Celtics, it's gravy. And what ended up happening because of the new ownership and the process, you get Joel Embiid, you have all these assets, expectations go through the roof, they're winning 50 games a year. The expectation is they're eventually going to win a championship or at least come close. And of course, they make one bad decision after another. That's one side of me, that the expectations of the franchise have changed. The other side is, and this gets back to what we were talking about a minute ago, and I've written this, so I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't say in print. They need to figure out what kind of organization they want to be. They don't know. The Eagles know who they are. The Eagles pride themselves on being innovative, on being a step ahead when it comes to football strategy, when it comes to dealing with the salary cap, you know, the tush push, the going forward on fourth down routinely. That Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Rose would want to be on the cutting edge of what's happening in the NFL. The Flyers under Ed Snyder for a long time had a particular identity. They got a little tied to it after a while, but at least you knew what they were all about. The Sixers don't have that. And they haven't had it since Josh Harris bought the team. And I just wonder if that is a kind of intangible component that really, really holds them back. And it certainly holds them back in respect to, I think, people in the marketplace, as you guys just kind of expressed, like putting their arms around them. You know, there's not that sense of you're the community's team. You know, Jeffrey Lurie's been here 30 years. He's made himself part of the community. The Phillies ownership group, you know, with David Montgomery as the face of it for so long, and then now John Middleton, they're very Philadelphian. The Flyers are trying to get back to that. The Sixers don't really give off that sense, in large part because Harris owns the Washington Commanders and the Devils, and I think he views owning a pro sports franchise as a really good business investment.
So let me throw something in there. My thing is, I believe, now this is where I differ a little bit, meaning I think the Sixers the last 4 years.
If you think I'm full of crap, you can say I'm full of crap.
I'm going to say that, but I think in the last 4 years, I think the Sixers had invested in the team to make the roster better. So I know people, let me say Josh has been bad, but I look at it, every year from the last 4 years, they've made adjustments to the roster to make it better. It's been one caveat all 4 years. Joel Embiid's got hurt. And as long as your best player, respectfully, is getting hurt when it's time to win, how far can you truly expect your team to go? And I think that's something that surrounded him. Like you said earlier, they have to look at the season as if Joel and Paul George are not going to be healthy enough to play, and surround the rest of their roster of people who can keep them afloat, actually win games without him. And I think so, as far as Josh, I can't speak on him as to that, but as far as the team's concerned, that's my thoughts. More questions?
I'd like to hear your opinion on...
Don't get me fired now, because I can see it coming, I can see your mind racing.
Simply, the regular season versus the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
We've been following basketball since 1967. I'm an old guy. And, you know, all the way from Russell and Chamberlain, all the way through the modern era. And the regular season used to be riveting. Every game was competitive. And the regular season to me has become like an 82-game exhibition season. April 15th turns around, and Pistons-Knicks was unbelievable. You can go through every series, and the ball has gotten better and better and better and better. And I'd just like to hear both takes from
Mark, you take that one because you dealt with playing an 82-game regular season.
So it has changed. The way players and coaches and management perceive the NBA season has changed. When I was in the league, we prioritized every game. We prepared for every game. Not saying they don't do that now, but I also believe there's a lot of other people making decisions that's out of the player's control. Now you have people in the front office and higher. That's why Sixers not considered all NBA teams. People that's on the medical staff are now approaching the players, hey, you're not playing the next 2 games. Play like, why? Because according to our data, you have played a certain amount of load and you need this rest in order to be healthy for the remainder of the season. People like, I feel fine. And that's a back and forth. And now because the teams are hiring a lot of these people to make these decisions, it's out of the player's control. So when you see, so you got that aspect of it, then you got people saying, as long as he gets to playoffs, anything possible. And let me put that, I'm not gonna just put that on the players and the teams, I'm also put that on the NBA. Because I understand the referees are a different entity, but there's no way in the world the game can be called where if I look at Mike, it's called a foul.
Correct.
But in a playoff, I can tackle him and it's not a foul, which means the league has made it clear, like, let it be more physical. The people tell the referees, no. The referee takes orders from someplace, and it has to be coming from the head office. So the way so I think the league, the NBA says, you know what, people don't want to see that They want to let them play a little bit, let the best players prevail, let the truth thing. And I think so. I think it's not, the regular season is not prioritized by everybody. The players just got to do their job. When they're out there, they're not sugarcoating them. They're not half speed. They're going full force. But when they're being told to rest certain games, these, believe it or not, people don't believe this, but it's not the players that's sitting out, unless they're truly hurt. They're getting marching orders from up above, medical people that was hired to say, you should sit out this game for your overall well-being for the season. And people blaming the players. Players like, no, I was told I'm not playing. I didn't want to not play. LeBron James is the first one this year that said, I'm not listening to none of the head guys. I'm trying to play every single game unless I'm hurt. He was the first person to actually come out and say that. Because it's not the players that decide to sit, it's people in the front office say, you're going to sit. There's
another dynamic with it too. I won't speak to Mark's perspective on the athletes themselves, but from a league standpoint, each league is expanding the playoff field every year, virtually. This question comes up a lot with respect to the Phillies. I do this weekly radio show with Rob Ellis on WIP every week, and it's a point we make all the time, that people should appreciate how good the Phillies are for the 162 regular season games they're going to play, and try to go into the playoffs with that feeling of, look, you got 162 games worth of excellence. And remember that it used to be that if you won your division, there was only one other team in the postseason with you in your league. Well, that's not the case anymore. There are 7 playoff teams, or 6, however many are in each league. So there's going to be a greater emphasis on the postseason. The NBA has expanded its postseason. You now have play-in games, so that you have 11 teams in each conference that are technically playoff teams. So if you tell athletes and fans that this longer postseason is so much more important, they're going to play for that. They're going to gear up for that. Now, the NFL can get away with it because of how short the season actually is, although within the next 2 or 3 years it's going to get longer. It's going to go to 18 regular season games. But it's only generally once a week. It's not 82, it's not 162. So that's another factor too. Again, some of it is about our perception of what matters in a particular sport compared to the way we used to look at things. Whoa, that brought a lot of hands. All right.
He had his hand up. The man jumped in the back, yes.
I appreciate it. Can we go back to the first answer, the first question that we talked about the Sixers? And we go through the process, and now we're in a situation, my question more specifically is, if you were Daryl Morey, would you look to find players to complement George and Embiid and the team that's in place? Or would you look to take more of a Flyers approach of, we're going to clear out, we're going to get young, and then eventually we'll look down the road on how we're going to build this team?
Anywhere you can, and it's going to be difficult, as Mark said, because of the limitations of the cap, you just got to get talent. You just have to draft, or like with the 3rd pick, you take the best, whoever you think the best player is, take that guy. It's the old example that's always held up. I'm not a big believer in picking drafting a player to fit in with the particular team that you have at the particular time. That is the reason that the Portland Trailblazers, with the number 2 overall pick in the 1984 draft, picked Sam Bowie instead of Michael Jordan. It's because they already had a shooting guard in Clyde Drexler. Why do we need 2 shooting guards? Well, when you draft the greatest player who ever lived, you trade the other guy. So if I were the Sixers, I'm just saying I'm getting talent, no matter where it is, no matter what it looks like. And as Mark said, I'm not even planning, if Embiid and George are healthy, we'll figure it out when we figure it out. But we've just got to get talent in here.
And let me touch on that. To me, it's only one team that's a plug-and-play team in the NBA that make their bones on just going to sign or make these big splash trades, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. I think the way that new collective bargaining agreement is, you have to build from young. You have to win with young guys. You have to get these guys to develop them. It's going to be difficult now to go sign all these free agents. I think last offseason was the last year. You're going to see teams have so much freedom to sign older veteran guys and try to win with them. Now you got to really, there's no more, relatively speaking, there's no more middle class in the NBA. middle class, and this comment is only about NBA salaries. When I was on the board in NBA, we fought for middle class. We fought for the guys because I was the middle of the pack guys. We fought with those guys to get a certain middle class type of salary. Now with the new CBA, that's pretty much been thrown out the window. You're either making a lot of money or you're making below your market value. So it's going to be very difficult for teams to match teams up based on trades. They got to get these young guys to develop them, because that's pretty much all the money you're going to have. You're going to have enough money for certain high caliber guys, but young guys. But then you look at building from young, you got to give them something to get something. So I mean, if the 76 want to build something young, that means you got to get up Paul George. You got to get what you want to be. And the question is, that may be nice to say, but who wants them? So people say we should start young and rebuild, but we got these contracts for another 3 years. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's the only way to get younger is you got to find somebody to take these guys. And the way they both was injured last year, that's gonna be a tough call. I think we have time for one more. You said one more question. Sure.
All right, what's the caliber when you look across the country? Where does the Philadelphia Catholic League fit in terms of the caliber? And any chance I ever write a book about the Catholic League?
Two really good questions. I think that the Catholic League, in terms of its history, in terms of its rivalries, its connection to the community and to the greater region, and certainly the quality of players it produces, I think you can put it up against just about any league in the country. I mean, that night, that doubleheader, where I think they still do it, where the girls play and the boys play in the championship games, is remarkable. With Phil Palestra, it's amazing. Mark and I were actually talking about this. The dynamic in the league now is really interesting to me, because so many of the schools have closed over the years that sports has become a reason that these schools exist. It's not, like I grew up in Glenside, basically. So if I had gone to Catholic high school, I would have gone to McDevitt. And maybe it just so happened that in 1995, there was a group of 5 or 6 kids who were awesome at basketball in the Glenside, Wyncote area, and they turned Bishop McDevitt into the Catholic League champions. That ain't happening anymore. Archbishop Ryan's team that played Roman the other day, their best player was from Jersey. St. Joe's Prep recruits players from everywhere. LaSalle recruits players from everywhere. And schools like Father Judge, to stay open, to get students there, are accenting sports more and more. So, you know, what Mark talked about the NBA kind of trickling down to the collegiate level, what was the collegiate level is now trickling down to high schools even more than it already did. As far as writing a book about it, I think it would be something that would be really, really enthusiastically read by a very, very small population in the Philadelphia area. I'm hoping, with the Rocky book, I'm hoping that people outside, I'm hoping everybody in Philly reads it, but I'm hoping that it's got a broad audience outside that too.
Let me touch on that. Coach John Chaney, who was my coach at Temple University, said a statement at a press conference one day that I think about up now still. He said, students apply to colleges most of the time, or universities, because they've seen them on TV and sports. Unless you're the blue blood, like you're the Ivy Leagues, he said most of the time schools get applications because a kid watched them in a football game or basketball. Even if they have no interest in the sport, that's how they know the school. And that's why they get applications. You look at the Philadelphia Catholic League, and unfortunately, it's a major. My son's been going to Roman Catholic since 9th grade, and they're going to graduate Roman Catholic. We're not transfer people. But now, even the Catholic League, everyone wants to play in the Catholic League because of the cholesterol. My little brother, who graduated from UPenn, he went to, every year he goes to the Philadelphia Catholic League Championship. He's amazed every year. And then he always goes to the very next Penn game, and he shows me Catholic League, UPenn basketball games. And how it was so loud to be in 1,000 people there. And he said it's remarkable that the Catholic League does that. I remember, I forgot who did the write-up, but they said this, the Philadelphia Catholic League playoffs, the 7th greatest sports event you would have to see in person. And that was up there with Duke versus North Carolina. That was up with the Super Bowl. Like, that's telling you the magnitude of it. So the Philadelphia Catholic, people want to play in a Catholic league. They want to see that. They see that fan base, and they see the tradition. And I'm big on tradition. I'm using tradition. And I look at that Catholic league, And I look at myself, and that game he talked about, Ryan, brought me, when I was a big thing that, not last year, they won a Catholic last year versus, I forgot, but that was the year before they beat Ryan. And as I was watching it, it brought me flashbacks to when I played against Rasheed Wallace, when he was at Simon Gratz and I was at Roman Catholic. And when I looked at the Philadelphia Public School Championships, which is great basketball, but they rarely get attendance. I looked at Philadelphia Catholic, people, the students of Roman and other Catholic literally buy the general admission tickets and sell them for thousands of dollars on the internet. Like literally. Like people fly in from California and San Diego and Wyoming to come watch the Catholic League. That's hard to say. There's many high school places in America that does that. And I'm not saying we have the best talent. I know we have tradition.
Everyone, thank you again for being here. We really appreciate it.